On the 1st of June, 1861, Fairfax would see its first skirmish. In fact, it was to be the first skirmish of the Civil War. The Union cavalry rode up Main Street and were met at the Fairfax Court House by the Warrenton Rifles, led by Captain John Quincy Marr. In the ensuing battle, Marr would be the first Confederate officer killed in the war. Another skirmish at Vienna followed, the first time a train came under attack in a war. Both fights would prove to be a preview of the devastation to come to Fairfax. President Lincoln ordered Brigadier General Irvin McDowell to march his troops from Washington to Manassas, where Confederate forces under General P.G.T. Beauregard occupied the railroad junction. On July 18, 1861, at the fords on Bull Run, the Confederates made a stand. McDowell's men were confident of victory. They anticipated pushing the Southerners all the way back to Richmond, the Confederate capital. The Union officers, so sure of victory, packed their dress uniforms in anticipation of a grand celebration. Jim Burgess, battlefield historian, explains.
At the time, many thought this would be the first, last, and only major battle of the war. Many politicians and civilians followed the Union Army out from Washington to watch what they thought would be the climactic event to a very short rebellion. The throng of civilians was so great, there was a shortage of horses and carriages around Washington. Many provisioned themselves with picnic baskets, as it was a good 8-hour ride from Washington to Centreville, where many observed the battle.
On the morning of July 21st, the Union Army opened the Battle of Manassas, or Bull Run, as it was called in the North, with a diversionary attack on the Confederate left at Stone Bridge. A Union soldier recalled,
"It was stifling hot. Not a breath of air was stirring. I can only recall that we stood there and blasted away. There was a wild uproar of shouting and firing. The faces nearly were inhuman, and through the smoke flashed a rebel musketry."
Confederate General Joseph E. Johnston had sent reinforcements to General Beauregard via train from the Shenandoah. This was the first time trains were used to transport troops for tactical purposes. The armies fought a pitched battle. In the midst of the heaviest fighting, one Southern brigade, led by Thomas Jackson, stood firm, refusing to retreat.
Later that afternoon, General Barnard Bee of South Carolina pointed to Jackson's line as he tried to rally some of his troops and shouted, "Look, there stands Jackson like a stone wall. Let us rally on the Virginians."
The nickname stuck to General Stonewall Jackson, and his bravado helped inspire the Confederates and turned the tide to victory. A major in Jeb Stuart's 1st Virginia Cavalry wrote,
"I have no time to write the particulars of the battle. Can only say that it raged for hours with incarnate fury. The field battle after the fight presented the most awful sight you can imagine. At some point I found it difficult to ride among the dead without treading on them. Headless, mangled, dying. My God, what a sight. And what a sin." About 4, the enemy fled in utter confusion, leaving everything behind them.
The retreat was so haphazard that many soldiers ran right through people's houses. Sarah Summers Clark remembered the soldiers.
The roads and fields were soon filled with Union soldiers running like mad to get back to Washington. They were so scared they hardly knew which way they were running. There was a long hallway extending through our house from back to front. Many retreating soldiers ran pell-mell through the house like hunted animals trying to get away.
All in all, the Union suffered 1,500 dead and wounded. The Confederates lost 1,900 men, but won the day. General Beauregard wanted to take advantage of the Confederate victory and lead a full-scale pursuit into Washington. On October 1st, he and General Johnston met President Jefferson Davis at the Wilcoxon Tavern across from the Fairfax Court House. Beauregard's idea was scrapped as calmer heads prevailed. The defeat at Bull Run was not taken lightly by the Union. Lincoln ordered 68 forts to be built around Washington for the defense of the capital. 5 were located in the eastern part of Fairfax County. While the demoralized Union forces were regrouping, the flamboyant Confederate cavalryman, General J.E.B. Stuart, took Munson's Hill and Mason's Hill near Bailey's Crossroads. These were to become the closest Confederate outposts to the city of Washington. President Lincoln was dismayed to see the Confederate flag flying from Munson's and Mason's Hills. From these vantage points, Stuart's men were able to train their telescopes on certain windows in Washington, where Confederate spies signaled strategic information on Union troop strength. In October, the Confederates, under General Johnston, fell back from the Bailey's Crossroads area to Centreville in order to consolidate their lines. On November 20th, 1861, General George McClellan staged a grand review of the Union Army at Bailey's Crossroads, an event designed to bolster sagging morale. The new Union Army was 50,000 men strong. With President Lincoln and the cabinet looking on, the Union forces spread across 200 acres of land. The sight of Union soldiers proved so inspiring that a young poet, Julia Ward Howe, wrote stirring new words to the familiar song John Brown's Body and created the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Little fighting occurred in the winter of 1861-62. The cold was the greatest enemy to Johnston's ill-fitted Confederate troops. The treacherous weather at Centreville proved devastating. Forests were depleted to build Confederate winter quarters. Farm supplies were confiscated. Sarah Summers Clark remembered,
"Our neighbors had their crops taken from them, and their pigs were in such demand they had to keep them in the house to prevent them from being stolen. Whenever the Union Army broke camp, there was a mad scramble by everyone, black and white alike, to see what they could find. Shoes were so scarce that people were glad to get a hold of a pair that some Union soldier had thrown away."
On December 20th, 1861, Dranesville saw the only action of the winter, which pitted J.E.B. Stuart against General Edward O.C. Ord. Ord brought wagons to collect hay from the southern farmers, but Stuart fought him at every turn, trying to save supplies from being confiscated. The skirmish, known as the Battle of the Hay Wagons, would be a harbinger of the fighting to come.
Disease killed more men than bullets during the Civil War. Typhoid, dysentery, and measles in particular killed many Confederates while encamped around Centreville during the first winter of the war.
A Union surgeon wrote to his family,
"Dear parents, measles have continued to increase and have assumed an alarming degree of virulence. 16 men have died in the last 30 days. 3 have died today."
Disease spread to the civilian population. Sarah Summers Clark remembers,
"My mother was sick with the measles. Every person on our place, black and white, had the measles, which they caught from the soldiers.
2 people die from disease for every one who dies of an injury received on the field of battle."
In March, the Union Army advanced on the Confederate fortifications in Centreville as the Southerners, under Johnston, moved across the Rappahannock. Amazingly, the Confederate cannons were revealed to be a sham. An unidentified Union soldier recalled,
Some of the boys and I thought we would go up and see the wonderful fortification there. There was one large fort where there had been about 100 guns. And all around, there were about 50 sham forts where the logs and stovepipes were put up to scare somebody.
The forts were protected by Quaker guns.
Quaker guns consist of tree trunks, cut off, positioned in the embrasures of earthworks to look like real cannon. They're Quakers because Quakers oppose war, but a Quaker gun could not harm a mouse.